Okay, next we have Sandy Bartley, and he is a local lawyer, and Sandy is quite accomplished. He's been fighting for the people since 1986. His expertise is in all aspects of real estate, corporate, commercial, personal injury, and family law. Sandy, too, has been keeping a close eye on our city council, especially when the AAP process was used for the replacement of the maintenance yard buildings and other items. He has helped cause the cancellation of the initial 2 attempts on the AAP. So this is the 3rd attempt. Here to tell you how that works out after his countless hours of review, research, and preparation. Let's welcome Sandy Bartley.
Well, good evening, everybody. I just wanted to comment one thing about Jeff's presentation before I begin. Jeff, would it help people to resolve some of these issues if they went to city council meetings? And when are city council meetings, Jeff? When are they? Mondays? Okay. Yeah. So everybody here, yeah, you can find it on the city website. And if you want to engage with your city council, the place to do that is during these meetings that the city council has. You have an opportunity to speak at these meetings if you sign up beforehand and let them know what you want to talk about. So if you have issues with your taxation, if you have other issues with the city and with the way that they're managing your money or managing your property, you can go down on Monday nights, sit in and wait your turn, and be kind and respectful in the way you approach them, and let them know what you think, and ask them questions. So, AAPs. So, I knew nothing about AAPs until about October of 2023. And like the moderator kindly said, I've been practicing law in Nanaimo, and I have many clients since about 1986. And I knew nothing about an AAP until my wife said, "Hey, do you know what an AAP is?" And I was befuddled. She said, "No, it's a system where the city can borrow money by simply putting out a notice in the newspaper. And if you don't respond within a certain period of time, they can borrow hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayers' money." I said, "That can't be. This is just impossible." So I looked it up and I started to become a little bit of an authority on the matter. And to my surprise, she was right. The AAP process is a process that's contained in one of the pieces of legislation in British Columbia called the Community Charter. I don't want to talk about the Community Charter, but just so that you know, it's a provincial government authority to the municipality to use the AAP process to pass a borrowing bylaw to authorize them to borrow funds. You have to pay that money back. So if they borrow $100 million and it carries with it some interest, you have to pay the $100 million back together with interest. Now, my colleague Jeff just showed you some graphs as to how much money is going to be borrowed or projected borrowing over the next few years. There's a lot of interest attached to that money as well. There's a principal, and then there's all the interest that has to be repaid. I don't know, have any of you had any experience with the AAP? Let me see a show of hands. So I can tell that's pretty much what the vast majority of people in our community say. I didn't see hardly any hands at all, so maybe 5 or 6 out of this entire group. And that's pretty much what I found when I was doing my walking around and talking to people and trying to figure out whether or not the methods of advertising that the city chooses to do to notify the citizens that it's borrowing money is effective. Well, it's not. It's wholly inadequate. I've told the city that several times, and I continue to believe that it's not an adequate process to notify people that the city's about to borrow funds. So the only way the city can borrow money is through the AAP process or through another process called a referendum. Now, a referendum, as opposed to an AAP process, is a more democratic way of having a thing like a borrowing go ahead. During a referendum process, you go out and vote much in the way you vote in an election, and the majority of the people that vote either yes or no to the initiative carry the day. Very democratic, right? That's how we elected Cheryl Armstrong, for instance. So why the city uses an AAP process is a mystery to me. One of the answers that I received from the city is that the referendum process costs about $300,000 to run, whereas an AAP process is a much cheaper process. So they're looking out for our money, right? I understand that there may well be a lot more money to run a referendum, but I think if the city would to canvass the people of Nanaimo to find out which process they prefer, I think they will find that the people of Nanaimo will tell them a referendum is the preferred process. Pardon?
Well, you didn't. You forgot to say everybody here, they don't even know that they said yes to the.
Yeah, I'm getting to that. And if anybody didn't know, that's Noni, my wife. Reminding me that I'm not doing it in the right order. She works hard. She works hard. So that's just one of the ways that AAPs differ from a referendum. In a referendum, there's a certain result. In an AAP, there isn't. If an AAP is, if there's a number of opposition votes, there's 10% of the population or the tax-paying population or the electors in your area. If 10% send in opposition forms, the AAP process is denied, and they cannot pass the borrowing bylaw. They must then go to a referendum. So when you're borrowing a lot of money from a source and asking people to repay it, it's always been my view that you need to ask them. You need to actually ask them if they can borrow your money and have you repay those funds over a period of time. I don't know if any of you are aware, but the new fire hall that was built with an AAP. How many of you realize that they borrowed funds to build the new fire hall? So again, 6 people in this great group of people. That's not a very good sign on the city notifying the general public about what they're doing with your money. I think they owe all citizens an obligation to make sure that the people are informed if they're going to be pursuing a loan on behalf of the people. Now, during a referendum process, there's scrutineers, and there's polls and polling stations, and there's a number of people involved to do what? Well, to ensure that the voting process is being done carefully and correctly, and to make sure that your vote counts, and to make sure that the votes are being done in a proper manner. In an AAP process, you drop your votes off at City Hall or somewhere else, and they're all delivered to City Hall, and they're counted by one person at City Hall. There's no scrutineers. Nobody knows. There's nobody to say that what the count is the accurate count. Again, not a democratic process, not something that can be verified, not very transparent. This phenomenon of using the AAP process is not just limited to Nanaimo. It's used by many municipalities in the province. I've had calls from people in Kamloops and Kelowna. I've had desperate calls from people in Victoria. I've had other calls from other people in the regional district of Nanaimo, Ladysmith. There are a lot of people that are very concerned about the use of the AAP process right across our province. It is a method of borrowing money that people find deeply concerning. If the municipalities were to line up their projects so that they could tandemly have many projects in a referendum process, like they are planning to do, I understand they're planning to do some referendums with the South End Community Center. That's right, Cheryl? In addition, I think there's a walkway that's going to go in there and some other things. These are all things that are kind of wants or good things or nice things to have. And they are suitable for referendums. The city's point of view that I understand is that where there's a need, something that's really needed by the city, they prefer to do it by an AAP, which is a shorter process and a less expensive process. But the amount of money that they want to borrow and the lack of notice to people just doesn't support a transparent process and a process where people can actually have a vote as to whether or not they want that money borrowed. There might be other ways that it can be done, but it's very simple for the city to use an AAP process to raise the funds. I see it that way. It's very simple. You send out a notice in the newspaper and you put it on the website. And that's your notice, folks. That's the notice you get. And if you don't bring a form back to the city of Nanaimo and drop off an opposition form, you are all deemed to have approved the borrowing of the funds. Under the legislation, that's what it says. You are all deemed to have approved the loan. So without notice, I don't know how you could have ever approved anything. I'll talk a little bit about the first two AAP processes I was involved in. The first one, I took a look at the legislation, and there were some problems that I noticed about the notice that was served, and it was, in my view and in my opinion, it was incorrect. And I passed that information to the city through a letter with a tab binder showing them my thoughts and my logic in approaching the AAP process. And the city agreed with me that it was improperly done. That process was voided, and they went on. The city went on to institute another process which occurred I think in January of 2024. They had our people running around in the sleet and the snow and the rain. It was quite cold, and standing out in the middle of the rain, gathering signatures, trying to inform people, doing the best they could to try and make people aware of the AAP and what it can do to you over a long period of time in terms of raising your taxes. Because that's the bottom line here. When people borrow money on your behalf and they take a long term to repay it, your taxes go up for a long term. You will have tax increases over a long period of time. I've been a taxpayer in Nanaimo since probably about 1978. I've been paying taxes here, and I'm disturbed about the taxes that we're paying now. And to see a projection like Jeff showed us is causing me deep, deep concern about the people who are least able in our society to be able to withstand those kinds of tax increases. I know that the city's point of view is Well, it's only another $150. It's, it's not too bad. It's only another $346. That's not too bad. Well, it might not be too bad for somebody who's working, who's earning an income, who's not on a fixed income, and who isn't a pensioner and an elderly person, or someone else who's has met with unfortune in their lives financially. Those people are going to be finding it impossible to pay their property taxes. And where does that leave them over this long period of borrowing? Where does that leave those people? They're going to have to leave our fair city because they can't afford to be here anymore. That's what's going to happen. Or they're going to have to relocate somewhere else out of their homes that they probably had for 45 or 50 or 60 years. So I'm here to tell you that the AAP process, while it might have been a good idea, and conceptually it makes some sense for the city to use it, there is some harm that gets done by using it. There's harm. A senior citizen, and I'm one of them, I'm 66, a senior citizen who is affected by the AAP that has no notice is going to have to pay an increased tax next year if one goes ahead. They can't afford to pay it. They don't have any options. If they knew about the AAP, if they understood what it meant, if they understood that process was going to increase their taxes and to such a degree that it's going to affect them, they would probably sign a piece of paper that says they oppose. So that's kind of the insidious nature of the AAP. What do you do? How do you build these projects? How do you put them together? Can you do it without an AAP? I still think a referendum is the best way to deal with it. You've got if you broke down the 300,000 amongst all of the people of Nanaimo that are going to be interested in what's happening with their taxes, I don't know the exact number, but it's going to be a lot less than, I think, $300 or $400 a year for 30 years. The point I want to make is, if you plan an AAP process rather than using an AAP process, if you use a referendum and you plan properly, you can put all of these projects on that referendum process. There's no reason why they can't all go together. I think is the one for the South End Community Center, is that in the spring?
We haven't made any decisions on it.
Okay. So whenever that is, spring or summer or whenever you guys make a decision on those things, what's the harm in putting something like these projects that are designated for AAPs on the referendum? Where's the problem in doing that? Yeah, you can. Oh. Okay. Okay. So 3 minutes? All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about a case I'm working on. There's a group in Victoria called the Grumpy Taxpayers. And I met these kind gentlemen and ladies through a phone call where they were inquiring about the AAP process I'd been involved in Nanaimo, where the AAP processes, both of them, the one in January as well, were voided through some of my efforts and a lot of the efforts from a lot of the other people in this room that you've been seeing as you're coming in. And they had a similar problem to the problem that was in Nanaimo. It's almost identical. So I informed them what I had done in Nanaimo. They were intrigued and they wanted to challenge the bylaw that had been passed in the Capital Regional District in Victoria. So in their case, they had to serve notice on 350,000 people. And they did the same thing Nanaimo did. They put it in a newspaper and in their website. The newspaper, the Times Colonist, has a circulation of about 25,000. And their website, I don't know if maybe a tenth of that would probably look at their website. And they don't actually have any way of determining whether or not they've actually notified anyone. So they plow ahead and they just go ahead and they pass their bylaws. So on behalf of those grumpy taxpayers, I've challenged the bylaw, and it's now in the BC Supreme Court. I'm going to be doing a full day hearing on September 3rd, and I'm going to ask the BC Supreme Court what they think. Do they think that that's suitable and adequate? Do they think that serving notice that way and not following what in my view is the proper procedures under the community charter, is that okay? And I'm hopeful that we'll get a good decision and a clarity from the BC Supreme Court, because the way that things are running right now are just not good. There's another AAP process now that has been scheduled to start September 13th of this year. It's for the same project that the last two were collapsed, but they've changed it a little bit. They're now calling it something different. They have a different name for it. And it's to build two buildings. There's the two buildings are going to cost roughly about 90 million. They're going to borrow for these two buildings. One building is a service building on a washdown area, and it's got a number of bays in it, and it's going to be servicing the emergency vehicles and those kinds of things. Probably something that's needed in Nanaimo, because the old building is not in very good shape. Then there's another building that they want to build. It's an administrative building, and they want to house some staff in there, and they want to have a brand new building for the staff. So the two buildings are now going to cost you $90 million, and there's a 25% contingency built in to the $90 million. So they're expecting perhaps some significant cost overruns or something, I'm not sure. But they're going to borrow $90 million of your money. I see that perhaps the bays are a necessity. The administration building is not a necessity. They are already housing their staff. It'd be nice, right? It would be nice to have all the staff located in one building. That would be a nice thing to do. But for the fact that it's going to cost us probably about $45 million, borrowed over a long period of time, and our taxes will be increased. So that building should be on a referendum. There's no way that building should be in an AAP. I can remember Mayor Krogh saying these words: AAPs are for needs, not wants. He said it himself. This administrative building is a want. It's not a need. And they've put that in, they've kind of buttonholed or button-hooked that administrative building on with the other building that really probably is a need. So I encourage all of you to study the AAP process, understand, and call me anytime you want. My door's open on this issue. I don't charge anybody for information or advice on the AAP process. I do this as a passionate thing. I want people to understand they have rights and they can assert them, and that they can demand that they get notice from the city of Nanaimo if they want to borrow money. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. We want to thank you, Sandy, and we have a few minutes here for questions. And so you can come up here, and again, please, this is a chance for you to formulate a question. Be clear on your question, and the question is going towards Sandy, and we just have a few minutes for this, so you're up.
Yeah, Sandy, thanks for your presentation. I agree with you that the AAP process is awful. It's insidious, I think, because it's set up in a way that anything they put on AAP is going to pass because people don't even know about it. So how can they oppose anything? But my question to you is there any reason that you're aware of, because these are all capital projects like buildings and things, that they can't plan ahead 4 years and hold referendums with the general elections? But because I've been involved in that before, I'm pretty old fart here, and I voted in other cities over the years, and I remember voting several times on referendums during the election of councils. And I don't know why they can't look 4 years ahead and have that on a referendum at that time.
That's a great question. Thanks for the question. Absolutely.
There is no reason why they can't do that. In fact, I advocate that. If you're going to be using these capital projects and needing these capital projects, do it with some foresight and vision, and let the people understand with a referendum process that they have a choice. They can either pass it or not pass it.
Again, thank you for your presentation, all the work you put into it. That does sound very Orwellian and ripe for conflict of interest. My question is, if you fail 3 of the AAPs together, how does that cost compare to one referendum?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't quite know, because I don't quite know what these failed AAPs cost the city. I don't know. I guess I could probably ask and get an accurate answer, but I don't know what the cost is. But I can tell you what the effect is. They still don't have a borrowing bylaw if the third AAP fails. They would have one if they held a referendum and it passed.
So my question is on the RCP, that's contractually required. So if an AAP was to fail and a referendum was to fail, then it goes to automatic tax increase. What do you think of that?
Well, if the AAP fails.
Okay, but the question is, under the RCMP for the rebuild of the detachment, it's required by contract that we must rebuild it. So if voter approval was not obtained, whether through AAP or through referendum, then that would be an automatic tax increases of probably 10% a year until we can build the dollars. So just asking what your thoughts are on that.
Okay, well, here's my reply. That particular contract, you've known about that for some time. Okay, so there's no reason why the city can't plan on putting that forward in a referendum. If it fails in a referendum, it fails in a referendum, and then there's direct taxation. But you have to let people know that if it fails, they're going to have to pay for it on their taxes in 1 year, right? Or 5 or 10 years. But you can't borrow the money over a period of time without the referendum, right? Yeah. And people, you have to trust the people. They know what they want. They know what they can afford. They're gonna vote their conscience, right? So trusting the people and trusting that they know what's best for them and let them make a decision is the way things should operate. Yeah.
Hello, Joseph Gary China here. This young gentleman just asked the question, and it sounds like you said you can't answer it. I would like to know what the cost of a referendum is compared to an AAP. Is that, did you know what it, you have to find out.
Cheryl Armstrong just told me it was $30,000 for an AAP and $300,000 for a referendum. But here's the rub. Yeah, during a referendum, you can have a referendum on more than one matter. So if you had 5 matters scheduled for a referendum, right, you could have all 5 matters decided on one referendum. And there's no reason why you can't do that. Make effective use of your money.
Hi, Sandy. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you.
Is it true that the last council had this brought up and they just couldn't figure this out? They couldn't deal with this situation, and now the new council is dealing with it, and there's a lot more money involved because of the repairs and things. So I'm just curious if the last council was introduced with this and they actually put it aside.
Well, that's a good question. My understanding is, and I've done a lot of speaking at City Council, some good nights and some bad nights. So you're right about that. It's not only the past council, it's past several councils that have known about the need for this public works yard building. It's been a trouble or a thorn in their side for some time, and it just gets pushed and pushed and pushed along. So until it becomes maybe a great need, and then all of a sudden it's costing millions and millions and millions of dollars. We have to borrow it and to pay the interest on top. So your $45 or $1 million building is gonna, was it 22 or 45 million for the public works building? Yeah, it was 160 million originally, yeah. Yeah. About 25 million years ago. So if they'd built that building years and years ago, Cheryl Armstrong just informed me, it'd be around 25 million. So you can look backwards and try and blame somebody for that. It's not effective. You have to look forward and use vision and use some planning so that you can get the best result for you taxpayers. And the city needs to give you that opportunity to make decisions for yourselves as to what you want and what you want to support. You may well support the building and the borrowing. I don't know. I'm just a guy who's trying to make sense of an AAP process that doesn't seem to work.
Excellent. So Sandy, thank you for your time and your dedication to our city, to this very important public matter. And